Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome. I welcome you all to this lecture in the course Sandhi in Paninian Grammar. We are studying Ach Sandhi or vowel Sandhi, and currently we are focused on the second classification of Ach Sandhi, namely Dvisthanika Ekadesha. Dvisthanika Ek Adesha, two substituents and one substitute. We are emphasizing on this particular aspect again and again in these lectures, mainly because this is a very fundamental part of Sandhi. And this particular aspect is reflected in several other types of operations as well, notably the accent operations. So, when you have two vowels as substituents, obviously they have one accent each. So, there are two accents as substituents and there is only one substitute. And so, there are rules stating this one accent. We will see this aspect later on in the course. It is important therefore to get this part extremely clear in our own minds. Dvisthanika Ekadesha, and that is why we are spending some time at the beginning of each and every lecture on highlighting and emphasizing on this particular classification of the vowel Sandhi. The first classification we said was Ekasthanika Ekadesha, where you have one substituent and one substitute, Ekasthani and Eka Adesha. We saw that there are two instances of this Ekasthanika Ekadesha, namely Yant Sandhi and Ayavayav Sandhi. Yant Sandhi is stated by the sutra Iko Yanachi and Ayavayav Sandhi is stated by the sutra Echo Yavayavaha. We have studied these instances along with the examples etc. in detail earlier in this course. Currently we are focused on this Dvisthanika Ekadesha, which is the second classification. This is stated by the Adhikara Sutra Ekah Purva Parayoho, which means one substitute takes place in place of two sounds, previous that is Purva and latter that is Para. Ekah Purva Parayoho 6.184. This is an Adhikara Sutra. This Dvisthanika Ekadesha can be shown diagrammatically in this particular manner, where you have A plus B in close proximity in the Samhita mode, and so one of the sutras in this section that begins with 6.184 and goes up to 6.1.112, one of the sutras applies, and then in place of both of them C substitute is stated. A comes immediately before B and B comes immediately after A. This is how the Samhita and the environment gets expressed in this particular section. So A plus B is the input and the rule applies and the output is generated in the form of one substitute C. There are 5 instances of Dvisthanika Ekadesha. Guna Sandhi stated by the Sutra Ad Gunaha 6.187. Second is Vriddhi Sandhi stated by the Sutra Vriddhi Rechi 6.188. The third one is Pararupa Sandhi, which we are currently studying, stated by the Sutra Engi Pararupam 6.194. The fourth one is Savarna Dirgha Sandhi, stated by the Sutra Akas Savarne Dirghaha 6.1.101. And finally Purvarupa Sandhi, stated by the Sutra Ami Purvaha onwards, that is 6.1.107 onwards. Amongst these 5, currently we are focused on the third Pararupa Sandhi. And this Pararupa Sandhi is stated primarily by the Sutra Engi Pararupam 6.194, and we have studied this sutra in detail. What this sutra means is immediately before a verbal root that begins with ing and immediately after a preverb that ends in short or long in place of both, one substitute in the form of latter, that is Pararupa, takes place. So you have pra plus ejate, where a appears at the end of this preverb and a appears at the beginning of this verbal root eja, and so they are in close proximity. A plus a is the situation, and in this limited environment, which is by default the environment for Vriddhi Rechi to apply, but that gets cancelled and 6.194 applies because of these limited environments, and you have pr, a and jate, pre jate as the generated output. In this lecture, we shall study some more sutras stating the Pararupa Sandhi, and these sutras are stated on this particular slide. Omangoscha 6.195, Usya Padantat 6.196, Atogune 6.197, Avyaktanukaranasyata Itau 6.198, Namreditasyantyasya Tuva 6.199 and Nityam Amredite Dachi 6.100. Let us study these sutras one by one. First, let us take Omangoscha 6.195 for our consideration. Omangoscha has got 2 words, Omangoho and Cha. Omangoho is 7/2 of Omang. Omang has got 2 constituents, Om and Ang. Ang is a preverb and upasarga. So Omangoho means immediately before Omang. Cha means and. Words continued are Ad 5/1 of a short or long, and so At means immediately after a short or long. Pararupam 1/1 of Pararupa, that is latter form. So the sutra means and immediately before Om and Ang, immediately after a short or long, in place of both a and o and a is substituted the latter form, in this case o as well as a. Here are the examples. Shivaya Om Namaha. This is a sentence. In this sentence you have a coming at the end of this pada followed by Om over here, and so in place of both of them, now this Om will be substituted as one substitute. So the output generated by 6.195 would be Shivai, O, M and Namaha. When we join it together, we get Shivayom Namaha. Then also we have Shiva plus A plus E. And now A plus E in the Samhita mode 6187 will apply, and the output generated would be Shiva A and He. Now this A over here and this they will become the input for 6195 to apply, and then the output generated would be Shiv A and He. When we join them together, it becomes Shivehi. This A is considered as A because A has substituted A, and a special rule to this effect is created, namely Antadivaccha. What it means is that this one substitute stated by 6184 acts as final of the previous element and also initial of the latter element. So this A comes in place of A as well as E. So this A can be considered as E or A can be considered as A. Considering A as A, now we have Shiva plus Ahi, and this A is A. So now Omangoscha applies and there is Pararupa Sandhi. So we get the form Shivehi. Let us go to the next sutra, Usya Padantat. This is 6196. This has got two words, Usi and Apadantat. Usi is 7/1 of Us. Us is a verbal suffix. Usi means immediately before Us. Apadantat is 5/1 of Apadanta. Apadanta means not at the end of a pada. So Apadantat means immediately after a sound that doesn't occur at the end of a pada. Words continued are Ad, 5/1 of A short or long, and this means immediately after A short or long. And of course Pararupam, 1/1 of Pararupa, latter form. So now this sutra means immediately before the suffix us and immediately after a short or long that does not appear at the end of a pada, in place of both substitute the latter form, that is u. I repeat, immediately before the suffix us, immediately before the suffix us, and immediately after a short or long that does not appear at the end of a pada, in place of both substitute the latter form, that is u. So now here is the derivation process. So we are deriving the form aduhu, which means they gave. They gave. This is derived in this particular fashion. We have the verbal root da, to which is added lung. Then we add to it, da lung. Then we add the suffix chli in the next step. Then we delete this chli by the sutra 2477, da 0 and lung. Then this lung gets replaced by g, da 0 g, and then we replace this g by us, and now we have da 0 and us. Now here we notice that this a, which is the long variety of is not appearing at the end of a pada. It is very much inside within a pada. followed by the suffix us. And so now this has scope of application for 6196. And so now in place of this a and this u, pararupa sandhi takes place, and u as one substitute replaces both of them, a and u. So we have a, d, u, s. When we join them together, we get adus or aduhu, meaning they gave. In this case, this a and this u, this is the environment. A is not appearing at the end of a pada, and so both of them get substituted by this latter form u over here. This is what is usya padantat. Let us proceed further and study the next sutra. This is ato gune. Ato gune has got two words, ataha 5/1 of at, meaning immediately after short a. Remember, this is at. At stands for short a. And gune is 7/1 of guna, meaning immediately before guna. And guna is a and o, defined by 1, 1, 2 adeng gunaha. The words continued are apadantat, 5/1 of apadanta, meaning not at the end of a pada. So apadantat means immediately after a sound that does not occur at the end of a pada. Pararupam is 1/1 of pararupa, that is latter form. All this put together, this sutra means immediately before guna, that is a, o, and immediately after short a, that appears not at the end of a pada. In place of both is substituted the latter, that is guna, a, and o. I repeat, immediately before guna, gune, that is a, and o, and immediately after short a, at, that appears not at the end of a pada, apadantat. In place of both, ekah purva parayoho is substituted the latter, pararupa. In this case it is the guna. So we have two examples. One is pathanti, they read, and the second one is labhe, that is I obtain. Pathanti is derived after the verbal root patha and the suffix lat being added to it. So patha plus lat. Then this lat gets substituted by jhi, and then this jhi gets substituted by anti, and at this stage patha plus anti, we have the suffix a that comes in between. So patha plus anti. Now here a is within a pada followed by another a. So this a can be called guna. So we have the environment where a not occurring at the end of a pada is immediately followed by a guna sound. And so in place of both of these sounds, we have pararupa, that is this a being the substitute. So then the next step is derived, pat, a and ti. When we join them together, we get the form pathanti, which means they read. So here we have a plus a, and both these, especially this one, latter one, can be termed as guna to satisfy the condition for ato gune to apply. And pararupa sandhi takes place. Similarly, if we look at the derivation of labhe, we have labha followed by the suffix lat, vartamane. Then this lat gets substituted by e. Then this e gets substituted by a. Then we have the vikarana pratyaya a coming in between. Now we have a which is not at the end of a pada, which is in between a pada, followed immediately by a. All this is in the Samhita mode. Now in this case, a plus a, the by default rules would apply and the vriddhi would be the substitute. But that does not happen over here because of this particular sutra, which says that when a occurs not at the end of a pada, and if a guna sound appears immediately after it, then in place of both of them place the latter, that is the para rupa, that is this a in this particular case. So then the next step would be labha plus a. This a is the substitute in place of this a as well as this a. So we have labha plus a, labhe, which means I obtain. This is atogune. Let us go ahead and look at this next sutra, avyaktanukaranasyata itau, 6198, and there are 3 words in the sutra. The first one is avyaktanukaranasya, 6-1 of avyaktanukarana. Avyakta anukarana means, avyakta means unexpressed speech. Anukarana is imitation. So avyaktanukarana means part of imitation word of unexpressed speech. This is the meaning of avyaktanukaranasya, part of imitation word of unexpressed speech. What is an unexpressed speech? So the sounds that happen in the nature, they get imitated by human beings. Such a sound is called avyaktanukarana. So part of it is getting operation, it is getting operated by this sutra. Ataha is 6/1, which means in place of at. And at here is not short a, at refers to its own form, that is at. Itau is 7/1 of iti, which means immediately before iti. Pararupam is continued from the previous sutras, latter form, and the meaning of the sutra is immediately before iti, when at appears as part of an unexpressed imitation, then in place of both of them, latter form, in this case e, takes place as the one substitute. And I repeat, immediately before iti, when at appears as part of an unexpressed imitation, then in place of both of them, latter form, that is e, takes place as the one substitute. Here are the examples. We have the word patat. Patat is an imitation. This kind of sound naturally occurs in the nature, and so in order to imitate it, we say patat. Now patat is avyakta anukarana. And now when we quote it, patat iti. So we have at over here followed by e, and now by the application of 6198, this at and this e get the pararupa sandhi. That means this e remains, and in place of this and this. So the output generated is pat, at is gone, and e and t. Joining them together, we get patiti. Similarly, ghatat iti, and this at and e, they both have the sandhi effect, ghat, e and ti, and the resultant form would be ghatiti. So the substituents are at and e, and in place of both of them we have E as the substitute. Now there is a Vartika on this particular sutra which says that Anekacha iti vaktavyam. It says that this substitute takes place only if the unexpressed imitation word contains more than one vowel, like patat and ghatat. When it contains only one vowel, like shrat. So we have shrat plus iti. Here this operation does not take place. This at and this e is not replaced by this e. It remains as it is, and that is shraditi. There is no change brought about at all. This context of avyaktanukarana continues in the next two sutras. The first one being namredita syantyasya tu va. Now let us look at the next sutra, namredita syantyasya tu va. This sutra consists of two sentences. The first one being na amreditasya and the second one is antyasya tu va. Let us look at them one by one. So the first word is na, which is negation, which means not. Amreditasya is 6/1 of amredita, meaning part of amredita. Antyasya is 6/1 of antya, which means in place of final sound. Tu means but, va means optionally. Amredita is the second part of the doubled element stated by 812 tasya param amreditam. Words continued are pararupam 1/1 of pararupa, avyaktanukaranasya from the previous sutra, which means part of imitation word of unexpressed speech, ataha 6/1 in place of at, and itau 7/1 of iti immediately before iti. So the meaning of the sutra stated in the two sentences is this. One substitute in the form of the latter form does not take place. In place of e in iti and at, which is part of the unexpressed imitation when it is reduplicated. And the second sentence is, but the substitute in the form of the latter form does take place in place of the final t and e in iti, that too optionally. So not this entire at is replaced, but only this t is replaced. So we have this patat and patat. When it is uttered twice, the second part patat, this is called amredita, and this is what is getting operationalized. So patat is one imitation of the unexpressed sound in the nature. When it is reduplicated because of 814 nitya vipsayoho, we have patat patat followed by iti. Now in this case, this at and this e, this does not get e as the substitute, but because of this sutra, only this final the and this e, they get the substitute pararupa, which is e in this case. So we have patat remaining as it is, this the and e is replaced by e, so we get patat pataditi. This is one output generated where there is no sandhi effect taking place, because this is an optional application. So patat pataditi is one form, and the second optional form is patat pata, this is pata, and then this the and e get substituted by e. So we have patat pata e and ti, and finally patat pateti by the application of the guna sutra. We get the output patat pateti. Let us look at the next sutra, nityam amredite dachi. This is 61100. There are three words in the sutra, nityam, one of nitya, which means always or without optionality. Amredita is 7/1 of Amredita, which means immediately before the second part of the reduplicated unexpressed imitation. Dachi is 7/1 of Dach, a suffix stated by 5457. Words continued are Pararupam 1/1 of Pararupa, Avyaktanukaranasya 6/1 of Avyaktanukarana, meaning part of imitation word of unexpressed speech. Ataha is 6/1 of At, meaning in place of At. Antyasya is 6/1 of Antya, that is in place of final sound. To put this together, we get the meaning, namely, immediately before the Amredita, which comes before the suffix Dach, final Ta in At, and the initial of the Amredita, they both always without optionality get substituted by the latter form, that is the initial of the Amredita, when it is part of an unexpressed imitation. I repeat, immediately before the Amredita, which comes before the suffix Dach, that means Dach suffix is added after the Amredita, final Ta in At and the initial of this Amredita, they both always without optionality get substituted by the latter form, that is the initial sound of the Amredita, when it is part of an unexpressed imitation. So patat patat we know is unexpressed imitation, and after this is the suffix Dach that is attached to it. In fact, when this Dach suffix is added to patat, then patat gets reduplicated because of this statement, Dachi bahulam dve bhavataha. And so we get patat patat plus Dach. In this case, this is the Amredita, and this is the sound P at the beginning of this Amredita, and here we have the at the end of this first part, which comes immediately before the Amredita. Now this Amredita is coming immediately before this suffix Dach. So the conditions for 61100 to apply are fulfilled. And so now the first step is, because of this D, this Ad gets deleted, Patad Pat A. Afterwards this D and this P, they get the Pararupa Sandhi, and so in place of both D and P, only P remains as the substitute. And so we have Pata and Pata, Pata and Pata, and this is what is the output that is generated, Pata Pata. This reduplication has happened because of the statement Dachi bahulam dve bhavataha. To summarize, we have studied Pararupa Sandhi, and we noticed that Pararupa Sandhi applies in a very restricted environment. So Pararupa Sandhi cancels applications of other by default rules like 6187 and 88. Some of the rules apply only word internally like 6196 and 97, whereas the other rules only apply between two words, 6195 and 98. Now we study the next instance of Dvisthanika Ekadesha, namely the Savarna Dirgha Sandhi stated by the Sutra Akas Savarne Dirghaha 61101. But this we will do in the next lecture. Thank you for your patience.